Hello, and welcome to another episode of Looking into the Text. It is me, Stephanie Thomas. I'm the owner of the Right Edits LLC. I'm an editor, I'm a writer, I'm a publisher, and I'm an author. And guess what I like to do? Interview other writers and authors. Today we have Orlando Taylor. I think I got that right. And he's in the back waiting for me to bring him center stage. He's going to talk to us about his two already published books. And look, I have read some of the pages, and I'm feeling it. Okay, I'm with it. Two books of poetry, Black music, politics, and word bombs. And then the second, My Scars Are My Birthmark. So without further ado, I'm going to bring center stage Orlando Taylor to give us a little insight about his two literary works. All right, hey Orlando, how are you doing today?
How are you doing? It's good to be. I'm so glad that you have this platform and you invited me to be a part of this conversation. I really do appreciate you.
Oh, no problem. I'm glad you found me, okay? Because those are the
No
best
problem.
authors, okay? The ones that can find me. All
All
right,
right.
so we're going to talk about two books that you've already published, two books of poetry, okay,
All
that
right.
you've already
Yes.
published. So let's
Yes.
see, and I do have your interview questions here, but I want to ask you some ones that you don't know. All right, so
All
I'm
right.
looking forward to those. All right, so tell me about your latest book and why you wrote it.
Well, I wrote this book of poetry, Black Music, Politics, and Word Bomb, because I felt like the whole country was traumatized by the Trump president and, a lot of his hateful speech towards Black people. I felt like there was a great deal of proliferation of rape culture in this country with his advent, and some of the racist fascism it allowed to boil to the top of the political and social discourse in this country. And it just really felt like we were in a very negative and horrifying, place. The anti-blackness, anti-female, and eventually I felt like it morphed into including, LGBT issues as well. While at the same time simply promoting a level of whiteness that was only there for white males to access. And I just felt like, I had to say something to kind of derail this kind of like, toxic narrative of this minority in the countries. And it made me feel like the adults were allowing the less intelligent and less informed child or children in this country to run it. And this was my way as a writer to feel like I'm pushing back on allowing to take the child's hands off the wheels and to kind of write it and for us to kind of like bring things back to a real perspective of what was going on in this country. And so that was the reason why I wrote. I just felt like I felt compelled, given the kind of like verbal and physical assaults we as Black people and other minorities were experiencing with the rise or proliferation of fascism and white supremacy in our country.
Okay. So with the book of poetry, how many poems are in the book?
It's about half the size of the first book, so it's about 45 poems in the book. And one of the beautiful things about the book is I was inspired to in the book, I include the QR code for every song. Every song was inspired or influenced by, every poem was inspired or influenced by a song. So what I did is I include the QR code for that song out on one of the streaming platforms, which is free for you to access. And then I also in the book I include a QR code for a playlist which gives you the whole playlist of every song that inspired or influenced the creation of poems. And so it really was a powerful process for me as a writer because I'd never done anything like that. And when I was sharing the idea with some other writers and some friends of mine, I said, yeah, man, he said, this thing that you're doing, he said, you have this powerful visual in the book and you have a few visuals inside the book as well. And he said, and you married with the music. He said, as I was reading some of the poems, he said, and just the music and the visual, it just really made me feel like I was having this kind of like sensory experience where I was experiencing your emotions. I was experiencing these words. I was experiencing this music. And I just really felt, engulfed in not only what you were talking about, but I felt like I was there, when you were writing it. And so that's what I wanted to give the readers this time around, something different, something they don't always get from us as writers, because we sometimes can say the writing process is so mysterious, and it's less mysterious than it is kind of like lonely at
Yeah.
times, because you really have to be focused and to get it out there and to do everything that you need to do to present it in a way that people are going to, connect and resonate with. So that's been the process. And it really was, lethargic, getting some things out of my spirit, and then as I was, sometimes, as a writer, you bounce things off people directly or indirectly as you're going through the process. And, so it was really great because as I was putting it together, I was really getting this really great response. And actually, some of the most powerful responses I had was from females, because my editor is a female sister by the name of Coach Laura Brown. And she was like, man, as I was going through, she says, I learned so much. She said, one of the things for me that was powerful is that I learned a lot. She said, but I was also challenged. She said, even though you may not necessarily use big words, you're using words and putting words together in a way that some people may not be as used to or feel comfortable. And it's going to make you stop and think and like, okay, what did he really mean right there? And wow, he really put this word play together in a way I had never seen. And so I try to do that not just simply to be gimmicky, but I do that in a way to kind of challenge, where you are in your thought process, to kind of jar us, you know.
Okay. I have another question, but I'm going to hold that one. I think it'll
Okay, no
fit better
problem.
with one of
Let's
these.
go for it.
So, how long, and I see this one is about, this may be about your second book, but you can answer this question for both of them. How long did it take you to
Sure.
write this book?
Oh, I started writing the current book after I released the first book, My Scars Are My Birthmark. And that book, My Scars Are My Birthmark, was a book that was a culmination of writing, because as you know, the landscape for writing has changed a lot, with respect to being able to be published. So there's a lot more independent authors out there who publish themselves or go through independent publishing. And it really is great because 20 years ago, there were so many gatekeepers in the industry that really kept a lot of content from being exposed to the people. And I really think that the advent of platforms like Ingram Spark, Amazon, even though it has its own issues as a platform and as a company, the platform has allowed a lot of independent authors to get a lot of great content out there. And those poems came at a time where I was writing this point. I never really knew if I'd ever be able to be an actual published author. So from about 2005 to about 2018, a lot of those poems in that first book were being written through that period. And a lot of those poems address issues of emotion, issues in the Black community, things that I saw growing up as a kid, my own issues growing up as a young Black man, as well as marrying that with the intersection of Blackness with being a part of the LGBT community as well. And dealing with those things that you saw, whether it's violence in the community, whether it's, otherism, in the community, it was just, or just simply talking about what really is the Black experience. And the Black experience isn't just always trauma, but it's all of those things together, both the good, the bad, the ugly, the happiness, the sadness, the weather, even itself, the rain, the snow, all those things are part of our experience. And so in that book, over that time, I just took time as I was just writing about the things I had experienced growing up, and making decisions about who I am and learning to deal with, life. Whereas in this book, which took me probably about a year to write and another year or so to put in a format that, that you have it now, I just wanted to speak to the anger with the United States and the social political issues in a much more direct way, and deal with the issues of isolation and the concept of, of a benevolent God, retribution, reparations, the power of the African and the African American history and the culture, and how that can itself uplift, the African community and the rest of the country. Because as you know, the Democratic Party owes much of what it is in the past 20 years to first the Black woman, but as a whole, the Black community. You wouldn't have that party if it wasn't for us. And so I wanted to kind of, touch on some of these things in this new book, Black Music, Politics, and Word Bombs, because I wanted to really address, some of these things in a much more direct manner than I had previously. So the first book probably is kind of like a culmination of a life work for over the past 20 years. And the most recent book, probably in the last year and a half, it took me to write it and get it to this format. And so it's really been, it's really kind of been a whirlwind because it's kind of matched, the emotions that I'm trying to, and the emotions and the issues I'm trying to touch on in the book.
Okay, so I want to ask this question, and I know a
Okay.
lot of times for that first book is more, the mission is more for self gratification. And then that
Yeah.
second book, we say, okay, well, I'm a published author now. I want to give to people. So would you say your first book, it was more so a gift to yourself? And then the second book is like a gift to other people. Not gift may be not the right word choice, but more
No,
so
but I
like
think I
a,
understand what you're saying.
okay.
The one you had, like the first one, I would definitely say the first book is more personal.
Mm-hmm.
It's more directed at my desire to open my mouth and just kind of put myself out there, and to as well as being kind of like a bucket list thing and a feeling, like I said, because I didn't know if I would ever get to this point, just because of the previous landscape for publishing was so guarded, but once the landscape changed, I really felt like I had this opportunity. And this book, yes, I felt like I wanted to speak. I won't say speak for Black people or speak, but I wanted to speak to some of the things directly that I felt like the African American community experiencing, women are experiencing, and just the world is experiencing with respect to the African community as a whole is experiencing with respect to the rise of fascism, the rise of white supremacy. In some cases, really not a rise. It's been given this opportunity to kind of like speak more loudly than it has in the past. And I felt like a lot of people were talking about it, but we weren't really doing. We weren't really talking about it in a loud way, in a pushback way. I felt like we were speaking a lot to ourselves. So this book is hopefully will do two things: give more and more people the the courage to speak to and to speak against those issues that they feel that are strong in their hearts to speak to, but also it will show those other people out there, those others, that there are people who are here who are ready and willing to fight back in various ways, whether it's with words or whether it's with the political power that we need to. We're here to address these issues. We're here to push back. We're not here to be victims just because you want to oppress us. And that's what the purpose of this book is, to do that and to create a sense of connection, I hope, between all of us who feel that we need to fight against these kinds of things.
Okay. Thank you. So I know that you want to be a voice for others. Let's narrow it down to a target audience here. So what advice would you give other authors who are just getting started?
I would say the biggest thing that I find with many authors that they don't finish their goal is the diligence and the ability to, one, to believe in the product that you're trying to get to people, first of all. And secondly, is to be very steadfast, to be, to use old term, immovable, unstoppable in your desire and your quest to finally get your book to that point where you're going to be published. Um, don't be afraid. You can't do it all. So don't be afraid to find an editor, someone, because even though you might know your work, you still need someone there to help you to make sure that your voice is there in every poem, and that the poem is meeting the goal that you set for the project. And also I would just say that many authors feel that it can't be done. I'm living proof that it can be done. You're living proof that it can be done. And so ultimately just ties back is that you can't ever let go of your dream. You can't let that dream just dissipate in front of you. You have a desire and you have a goal, and there's something important and powerful in what you're trying to accomplish. And so you can never play that down, and so therefore you have to be very diligent in getting it done and not feeling like, hey, I've taken it this far and I just don't have that extra oomph to get it done. And it's one of those things where it has to be as important to you on a day-to-day basis as you're getting sleep. And that's why I've done it for myself.
Okay, so here's my question I was going to ask you earlier, but now I'm going to ask you now. So,
Okay.
in a part of your advice, to music a part of your writing process, or was it just with that particular project? Is listening to music something that helps you write, and would you give others the same advice? Listen to music if you're having a hard time writing. This is what helped me get through. So, what is your personal take or advice when it comes to that?
But definitely, because I would say music is something I'm lucky with the age range and when I was born that I fell in kind of in between like generations where I was exposed to, with my mom's generation who listened to things like Ella Fitzgerald and, Scott, listened to jazz and listened to, early Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell work, as well as early blues. And then I was introduced, to other forms of music with my older brothers and sisters, and then I, incorporated, the music that I was exposed to growing up. And I would say because music is such a part of my landscape, it's very much a part ingrained into my blood, as far as like what, how it influences me. And so I definitely tell people, some people say I have to be in a quiet space, and I find that sometimes the quiet spaces, don't always work for me. So listening to music that moves me, it doesn't matter. It could be up tempo, it could be, slow tempo, it could be the jazz genre, it could be soul, it could be Afro beats, because some of that type of music did influence some of the work in the current work. I also encourage writers on a daily basis, as much as you can, take some time to go outside and walk around, because I find that exposing yourself to other people in different situations on a daily basis gives you, it just kind of opens you up and frees you from being just simply the same thing all the time. So I would say music. I even remember listening to Toni Morrison. That was one of the things. Listen to other writers. I listened to Toni Morrison talk about her writing process. And surprisingly enough, part of her writing process, she says she sometimes sits with, and so does Octavia Butler. So they sit with a glass of wine near them as they're writing. And so, it's not about, you're doing something in that particular stuff. They're relaxing and they're allowing, in that case, that wine to kind of like loosen them up. And that's the thing you have to do is you want to loosen yourself up to be less rigid, to be less stoic. And I remember reading in some of my classes where the best writers, this one person says, he said, you have to learn to loosen yourself up in a way that you feel naked in your writing. And the more you feel naked, the more you're comfortable you feel naked in what you're expressing and what you share, the more powerful your writing becomes. And then also, it also opens you up to hear and listen and be empathetic to other voices. So now, you're not just you're a writer who's capable of writing in multiple voices. Not only if you're female, you can only write in a female voice, but you write in different types of female. Because if you are a cishet female, you might have a character who is gay. So you have to understand who she is, what she's about, what would be different in her voice than another voice. Maybe you have a female who is, say for instance, she is a aircraft mechanic. That's a whole different language. It might be a whole different background than a person who grew up to become a female who grew up to be a teacher. Same thing. So we have to learn to, and I think that's what I say with writers, being open, being free, being relaxed, and being naked, and being able to be a person who can write in more than one voice. Because when you think about it, if you can only write in one voice, your work is going to be very limited and it's going to get very boring very soon. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say I would encourage all writers to do, is to look at yourself as a person and then also try different genres. You might be good, say for instance, as a sci-fi writer, but that doesn't preclude you from being somebody who can write a rom-com, or for someone who can write something that is a literary piece or a nonfiction piece, because you are a writer. So I encourage art to write, period.
Period. So, which brings me to my next question.
All right.
As we get into being able to embody other personalities,
Mhm.
Does ego help or hurt writers?
I would say it can do both. The ego is there because you have to believe and feel you can write this story. And you're believing that, and on some level, even though you might have some fear there's it do is right of releasing it. But on some level, you feel that this is a story that people want to read. This is a people that people need to read, dare I say. And so, which means you want to be seen and you want to be and elevated by others. And there's nothing wrong with that because if the content is exactly what you say it is, then we definitely need that. And every writer has to be bold enough. Even some of the best, I think about people like, James Baldwin. He had to be bold enough, and an era was very, very anti-black and very anti-gay. He had to be bold enough to release those things, and he had to have a certain level of ego, despite all the hate he was getting on one side, to say, yeah, people are going to need to read this. This is going to be something people are going to want to hear. This is going to be something that could be helpful to the community. And so it hurts your work when you fail to listen to the wisdom, I feel like, and the facts concerning a topic, and you write from a false sense of knowledge. That's where ego, and truly that, because you're really getting into it just simply being about you. You just want to be heard. There's a difference between you want to be heard and you want to be heard because you want to elevate people and you sincerely are trying to give something to people, as opposed to you just simply want to elevate yourself and be seen as this kind of like guru of writing. And I think that's where it can be problematic, when you're writing.
Okay, so do you have friends who are authors? And in what type of ways have they helped you?
Well, I don't have a lot of friends that are authors. I have a lot of people, dabble, from time to time, say they wrote a poem down and something like that. And I always encourage people that if that's something you truly, truly, truly want to do, then lean into it. Do it more, but also read more. Read other authors, people like Audre Lorde. I couldn't, and people like Nikki Giovanni. I can't, Langston Hughes. I can't, you know, like play down the influence of such writers on my own writing. Not necessarily I mirror them, but just what I learned from them and the boldness of their writing. I try to incorporate that in my own writing. And I feel like I had a friend back when I was in St. Louis, where I'm originally from, St. Louis, Missouri. He was a black poet by the name of Percy Wells, and we both attended a number of different, open mics and different things, kind of this part of the scene back in the early 2000s. And we happened to be at a poetry series in honor of Langston Hughes. And I was one of the poets on the microphone, and I recited a poem which contained, some words or whatnot that the moderator didn't appreciate it. And after I got off the mic, she made a comment about not using certain types of words when you come to the microphone. And the poet, my friend Percy came to me and he was like, Toby, he said, don't let that bother you. He said, poets are not to be muted. He said, poets have a real purpose. Poets have been around for a long time in many different cultures, and poets hold a special place, as you know, in many cultures. Because he said, you're here to take those words and use them to elevate and help people see things that they don't always see. And he said there was nothing wrong, with the wording, and it was kind of my first time that I was encouraged to be bold and unapologetic and to not to matter about what you're saying, as long as your intent was not to directly hurt someone. He said, and that's why, and that's what I would say to all writers: do not let people mute you. Do not let people tell you that what you're saying is too much for people to take. Many times I find in that too much for people to take, you find that it's exactly what people needed to hear. And it's exactly what you need to say. Because if you don't, you become, we talk a lot about particularly male mental health these days, black male mental health, and in general, the fact that maybe black people suffer from a certain level of collective psychosis from being oppressed so long in this country, that you can't allow that stuff to just be bottled up inside of you. So you have a right, and we have a need for writers to be honest, to be open, and to be unmuted. And that's what I would say is be unapologetic and to be unmuted and to be unafraid as much as you can going forward.
Okay, thank you. So we're getting ready to wrap up, and I'm getting towards the end. So we're published, our book is out there, and we're getting into this marketing and support part, because that's the hard part too, is getting started and getting published, and then at the end, getting people to see you. So this question is geared towards family. So I will say, I did an interview with an author, and this is what her family does for her to support her. When she publishes a book, they purchase multiple copies, and they gift those copies to her so that she can sell them again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So my question to you.
I've never heard that before. That's wonderful.
So
I mean, I wish every author had that.
Yeah. So my question to you is, does your family support your career as a writer? And that's when I learned that. I was like, what? So my question to you, how does your family support you as a writer?
I mean, they support me by encouraging me. I think I get the type of support I think most writers get from families, because I think a lot of times they don't fully understand the process. They don't fully understand the purpose. And even sometimes when they do, because of their own lives, they don't have always the capacity to amplify you in the way you hope they would amplify you. So I try not to be too overbearing or think too much into that. And I wish we did have, because it would be great. I mean, that sounds awesome that they would buy a book or two and then say, hey, and then ship it to you and say, hey, now you just resell that at your signing or whatever it is you're going to do. That's awesome. That's awesome. But the only thing I would just encourage all families to do with writers is just simply just tap in. For a writer in this era, because of social media, is part of the driving forces. If we can get a like and a reshare, that's to me as valuable a lot of times as someone purchasing the book. Because a lot of times, even though our goal is to have the book in people's hands, sometimes I guess I try to get to the point where I'm marrying people buying the book and people also understanding and appreciating the content of the book. And it's kind of a catch-22, or the chicken, which comes first, the chicken or the egg, because you have to do one or the other, to get there. And so it's a dichotomy that is difficult to address, because you want to at the same time elevate the content, while at the same time you want people to see you and say, hey, buy this book, So it can be daunting, but I just encourage, I would say, my family tries to simply amplify by, sharing and reposting in the hope. And if they can do that, then that would be great. But that program that your friend was able to do with their family, that's awesome. And I'm glad they were able to do that. And I hope other families will do the same.
Yeah, I'm trying to get mine on board.
Please,
say, hey, she does this.
Help me understand how to get mine the same.
So here's my final questions, and then we're gonna go ahead and this is the final questions, and we'll be out. I'll be done badgering you with all my questions. Okay, so it's 2 questions in one. We'll try to condense it. So, what do you hope to accomplish with your book? Either you can both or just one, and then what does literary success look like? Is that a part of your part of your goal as accomplishment? Your definition of literary success. So, yeah, what do you hope to accomplish, and what does literary success look like to you?
Okay, the first thing I hope to accomplish is just the biggest thing is to accomplish is for me is informing the people. In the first book, it was not only just for me, but it was also allowing and encouraging, in particular, men to be informed by their own emotions, be informed by the issues that have gotten to this point in a way that you're not afraid to look at them, to address them, and to share them with other people around you in the hopes that those scars won't bury you, that those scars won't weigh you down. Those scars won't keep you from realizing that you are a beautiful person who deserves to be elevated and amplified. And I think a lot of Black men in particular don't feel that in this era. I think they're getting there, but because of the defunding of education in the 80s by Ronald Reagan and the advent of the drug culture and gangs was a terrible marriage that ultimately I feel like negatively affected the African American male more than anyone in the country. I'm not downplaying anything with respect to the successes that Black women have achieved, but they've been able to achieve those things with a certain level of, I would say, scrutiny that Black men have to get that they do not get in certain levels, in certain places. So I don't want to minimize their struggle, but at the same time, I do want it's important to kind of put a pin in that place where there are some specificities around the hate this country has had for the Black community directed specifically at Black men. So there was a part of that book in that I wanted to kind of look at my trauma as a way to getting other people to look at their trauma as well. And I feel like, and the same thing I'm trying to accomplish as well, which is to get people to look at these issues in our country that are constantly keeping us from being and realizing our full potential and being part of this country in a fully realized way that doesn't include all of the erasure. And that's really the success to me, if I can get people to do that. And buy the book as well. And it doesn't have to be New York best time seller, but if those people who do buy it have nothing but praise for it, then I feel like I've won. I feel like I've accomplished what I set out to do.
Thank you so much again for Orlando Taylor. And just close us out a little bit. Say your names of the books again, where we can purchase them, anything that you want to tell us. Now's the time to shine.
Okay. You can please find me over on Instagram under @olaoroom_king. My books are available on the popular platforms of Barnes and Noble bookstores. You can go in and order them in store, or you can go online and get them. You can also get them on Amazon under the books, as well as libraries and bookstores can order them directly from englandspark.com as well through that platform. So I really enjoy being here, and I really appreciate you elevating the writer, and particularly the Black writers, on your platform. It is something that needed, and I hope it's part of a renaissance that comes from our community. I really appreciate you.
All right, that has been another episode of Looking Into the Text with Orlando Taylor. I hope that you go and purchase his book, because I have to get me a copy. I love poetry. So guess what? He's going to be sitting right next to who? My Langston Hughes, okay? Because that's exactly where he needs to be, next to the great. For the next episode of Looking Into the Text.